Reducing poverty is a worthy goal for any government, but first knowing the size of the problem and also how it hits people is important. Our current measures of poverty don't do a great job at either. A new measure called the Material Deprivation Index aims to help. Geranda Notten is an associate prof at the University of Ottawa and architect of the Material Deprivation Index. Thanks for being with us.
Happy to be here, Amanda.
So let's just start with how we measure poverty wrong. What is it missing in our classic measurements?
Well, it's missing a number of, it's missing the fact that people's circumstances are often way more unique than poverty indicators focused on income can handle. So Canadian poverty indicators are fine. They're just not as accurate as we want them to be.
And of course, one of the things that you've noted is that income alone isn't a great measure. And on the Material Deprivation Index, I want you to just describe how that works. It's essentially things that you feel deprived if you can't have, which to your point is not necessarily just straight up income. Some people can be below the income cutoff for poverty but not feel deprived. Other people can be above the income level and still feel deprived. What are some of the items? What are we getting at when we talk about material deprivation?
Yeah, what we're getting at is not a subjective measure of poverty. It's an objective measure of poverty, but we're focusing on socially perceived necessities where most Canadians feel that if you don't have that, you are not meeting an acceptable standard for living in Canada. So, for example, one such item is whether a household can afford a pair of properly fitting shoes and at least one pair of winter boots for each household member. So that's one of those items. Typically, a material deprivation index holds 10 to 15 of such items. And once people miss a bunch of those items because they don't have the money to afford it, we consider them materially deprived.
And so once we know this is the case, that our measurements are maybe too broad, a little too blunt, what might we change about how we address poverty if we use a material deprivation index rather than the kind that the governments have been using?
Well, it definitely changes our view as to a lot of poverty measures focus on an income range. And what that means is that you might want to make that income range a bit broader when you know that a couple of million of Canadians are experiencing material deprivation, but they don't just meet that low income cutoff. That's one way. That's one way of how policy would change.
We did see some affordability measures in this federal budget, Geranda, including, of course, the GST rebate extended for some low-income households. Did you see anything that you think is meaningful material that will really help people?
Well, I'd like you mentioned the grocery rebate because that is a classic case of which would benefit in a very modest way people who have low income, but it would miss a whole whack of people who are material deprived, but whose income is a little bit higher than 50, 60K per year, which is what the maximum amount of income that you can have to qualify for the grocery rebate. So it's not just a very small amount. It comes down to about $9 a week extra for a family of 4 on an annual basis. But it also is missing a whole lot of people who didn't have a low income in tax year 2021.
Interesting. So an income cutoff shown not to be effective. We got to leave it there, Geranda, but it's wonderful to have you with us for this. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Geranda Notten is associate prof at the University of Ottawa. Of course, Budget 2023 did throw a bone to restaurants and bars by reducing the planned increase in liquor taxes. It was going to be 6%. Now it will be a 2% increase. But for small businesses, a lot of other help was missing, including extending the period to repay loans taken during pandemic. We want to check in with one of them now. Brenda O'Reilly is the owner of O'Reilly's Irish Newfoundland Pub. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks.
So I do want to start with, there must have been relief for anybody whose business depends on people being able to afford liquor, that we didn't see a 6% increase. How happy were you to see that in this budget?
Well, I'm happy that it came in at 2%, but it's still a tax that comes on every single April. They put it in 2017, so it's a tax that would automatically come on based on the cost of living every year. So, we'd like that tax revisited, of course.
So good point, and it does stack on top of previous increases, we should note. Overall, what's your sense of how business is doing, how consumers are faring? Do you feel as though you're kind of back to quasi-normal post-pandemic?
No, so the pandemic is one piece of it. And of course, as you spoke to already, the amount of debt that we took on during the pandemic just to stay alive, that's sitting on us now. We're going to have to pay that back this year. And, so that's a really cloud hanging over our head. Of course, inflation is killing us. People's disposable income is everything. The restaurant business is based on disposable income. Tourism numbers are not back to normal across Canada. And of course, people are not back in their offices working. So restaurants have really have had a hard time. Most of us are small, medium-sized businesses. A lot of us are independent operators. And, public policy is put on us like big business, but we're not big business. And so we are struggling, and we're going to take a time to get back to normal.
I know a lot of businesses were hoping to see an extension on that payback period for loans taken during pandemic. How important is this for you? What kind of debt do you deal with? And is it a struggle for you?
Yes, well, we took on a lot of debt. I have 4 restaurants, bars here in St. John's. So we did take on a lot of debt in excess of, a couple of $1 million just to keep us afloat for the last few years. And of course, inflation now is on top of that, and a looming recession. So it is a struggle. There's no doubt about it. And of course, we're hoping that the mini budget that normally comes out in the fall, that maybe she's saving it for that day. The little bit of reprieve with the credit card file. They're looking at, making credit cards reduce their processing fees. We're hearing 27%. What we had asked for was the government, take off the processing fees on the collection of tax in Canada, because we pay processing fees on the collection of tax, which we have no benefit from that revenue. So this was a compromise, I guess, on that file.
Yeah, that's a good point, that there's at least some movement on the part of the credit card companies. I guess it's hard to quantify how meaningful that will be for you. But inflation, of course, is something that you really have been struggling with, like every business. Have you had to raise your prices, and how much kind of willingness is there on the part of your customers to see higher prices?
So the easiest thing to do is put your prices up, but it's the hardest thing to do, because we are such a competitive industry, and we can price ourselves out of the marketplace, because if people's disposable income shrink, so do their abilities to go out and eat and drink. And of course, they can always do that at home. So the supermarkets and the liquor corporations around the country become our competitors. And so, we're very price sensitive. We always put our best foot forward. It is a struggle. I have put my prices up a couple of times this year. They will have to go up again this summer. Here in Newfoundland and Labrador, April 1st also marks minimum wage increase, and also marks our license fees. Our liquor license fees are going up as well. So there's a lot of things coming the one time, on top of the recession and the inflation and the pandemic. So it is a struggle for restaurants. There's no doubt about it. We will be a while coming back to normal, and the landscape is going to look a lot different here in Canada. I would fear that a lot of people won't make it.
Well, we hope you do, Brenda. We do appreciate you joining us for this. Great to have you.
Thank you very much.
Brenda O'Reilly, owner of O'Reilly's Irish Newfoundland Pub, a triple threat. Coming up, how to win in a race for investment in the new economy. But first, how big is your SUV? A Quebec survey finds they're bigger than most of us need. In fact, very few of the big rig drivers use the cargo space. Even fewer use all the seats in the vehicle. Yet SUVs remain one of the most popular types of cars, perhaps in part because we imagine all the things we might do with it. But since they are also gas guzzlers, the survey had at least one environmental group calling for a special SUV tax to discourage the purchase of the bigger vehicles. Let's just say that's an idea that will probably also go unused. We're back after this.